The year is 480 BC. You are 7 years old. Last night you slept in your mother's house for the last time. This morning soldiers came and took you. No warning, no ceremony. Just come with us. You're handed a single thin cloak. No shoes, no extra clothing. That cloak is everything you will own for the next 13 years. Welcome to the agoge. You've just entered the most brutal military training system the ancient world had ever seen. And if you survive it, if, you won't just become a soldier. You'll become something the entire Mediterranean world feared above all else. You'll become a Spartan. But the movies got this almost completely wrong. The real story of what it meant to be a Spartan is stranger, darker, and far more fascinating than anything in 300. Because Spartans weren't just warriors, they were the product of a society so obsessed with military perfection that it shaped every single part of daily life from the moment you were born. So let's go back. Let's find out what it was actually like to live inside the machine. First, you had to survive just being born. When a Spartan baby entered the world, it wasn't the parents' decision whether the child lived, it was the state's. A council of elders would examine every newborn. If the baby looked strong, it lived. If it appeared weak or sickly, it was taken to a place called the apothetai, a cliff at the base of Mount Taygetos, and left there alone. This sounds monstrous. In Sparta, it was just procedure. Every citizen was expected to fight, and the state couldn't afford soldiers who would break. If you made it past that inspection, you had until age 7 with your family. 7 years of something close to normal. And then the soldiers came. The Agog wasn't just military school. It was a complete dismantling and rebuilding of a human being. From age 7, you lived in barracks with other boys, supervised by older youths. Your days were built around physical training, controlled pain, and one rule above all others: endure. But here's the detail the movies always leave out: the Spartans deliberately kept you hungry, not by accident, on purpose. They gave you just enough food to survive, and then encouraged you to steal more. If you got caught stealing, you were beaten, not for stealing, for being clumsy enough to get caught. The whole point was to teach stealth and cunning. A soldier might need to forage behind enemy lines. He needed to be good at it. You slept on reeds, you cut yourself from the river Eurotas, with your bare hands, no tools. In winter, you might add thistledown for insulation. That was the luxury option. You wore the same thin cloak all year, no shoes. You walked barefoot through mud, rocks, and frost until your feet became like leather. The beatings were constant, not punitive, but ritualized. Boys competed in who could endure the most pain without flinching. There were public flogging contests at the altar of Artemis where young men were whipped in front of crowds of citizens. If you cried out, you lost. If you passed out, which occasionally happened, you had at least died without making a sound. Pain was not something to avoid, it was something to master. By the time you were 12, you had been cold, hungry, beaten, and sleep deprived for 5 straight years, and the hardest part was still ahead. At around age 18, if you'd survived the agoge, some of the best students were selected for something called the crypteia. It is one of the darkest things any government has ever officially organized. The crypteia was a secret operation disguised as a rite of passage. Selected young Spartans were sent out alone into the countryside, at night, armed with only a dagger. Their mission: kill helots. The helots were the people Sparta had conquered and enslaved. They outnumbered Spartans by somewhere between 7 to 1 and 15 to 1, a ratio that gave the entire Spartan system nightmares. A helot revolt could destroy everything, so the crypteia kept them terrorized. The young Spartan would hide during the day and hunt at night. He targeted the strongest, most capable looking helots, specifically the ones most likely to lead a rebellion. He killed them quietly, then disappeared. No trial, no record, just systematic killing wrapped in initiation ritual. Even ancient Greeks were disturbed by this. Aristotle called the helot system, quote, a permanent conspiracy against Sparta, but Sparta didn't have a choice, or at least they believed they didn't. The entire military machine existed partly to keep the helots down. Remove the machine and the helots would rise. So the machine never stopped. If you completed the crypteia and the full 13 years of the agoge, at age 20, you became a soldier. At 30, after a decade of active service, you finally became a full Spartan citizen, and your life still wasn't your own. Until age 60, every Spartan male was required to eat dinner at a communal mess hall every single night, the syssitia. You couldn't eat at home with your family, you couldn't skip it, you contributed monthly food payments, barley, wine, cheese, figs, and you ate with your unit. The food was famously terrible. The signature dish of Sparta was something called black broth, pork boiled in blood, vinegar, and salt. A visiting king from another city once tasted it and reportedly said, "Now I understand why Spartans don't fear death." But the Syssitia wasn't just about eating badly together, it bound soldiers to each other. The men you ate with were the men standing next to you in the phalanx, the shield wall. In the phalanx, if the man beside you broke and ran, you died. You needed to trust each other completely. The mess hall built that trust, one awful meal at a time. The phalanx itself was the Spartan superweapon, a wall of overlapping shields and spears moving as one organism. The key wasn't individual strength, it was the refusal to move, to hold the line, to die in place if that's what it took. Spartans trained their entire lives not to be the strongest fighter, but to be the most immovable one. For nearly 5 centuries, it worked, and the fear of Sparta was so complete that sometimes words alone were enough. When Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, seni kinsansi Pretsi Polisaritar RTB Arki Itsi printing if I invade Laconia, I will raze your city to the ground. The Spartans sent back a single word. It means Philip never invaded. Here's the part most people don't know. Spartan women were unlike any other women in the ancient world. While Greek women elsewhere were mostly confined to their homes, Spartan women exercised publicly. They ran, they wrestled, they threw javelins, they received an education, they could own land and property, one of the only groups of women anywhere in ancient Greece who could. By some estimates, Spartan women eventually owned close to 40% of the land in the region. The reason was practical. With Spartan men constantly training or fighting, someone had to manage the household and the economy. So women were trained to do exactly that hard. A Spartan mother famously handed her son his shield as he left for war and told him, "Come back with it or on it. Return victorious or return dead. Don't come back having thrown your shield away to run faster." That wasn't a movie line, that was a cultural standard. But nothing lasts forever. The citizen population, never large, constantly shrinking from wars, slowly declined below the numbers needed to hold the system together. The Helots eventually gained more rights. Rival powers rose. By the time Rome came along, Sparta had already become something close to a museum piece, a city where foreign tourists came to watch the ancient training rituals preserved out of tradition, a ghost of what the machine had once been. The system that had run without stopping for 500 years finally wound down. But for those 5 centuries, one word, Spartan, made the most powerful armies in the world stop and think twice.